What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Get the Bag podcast. I'm your host, Claudia Castro. Got my co host, Tim Park. This is
Yo, yo.
episode five, fifth episode of the year. Really excited for this one, especially for many of you guys who, getting started into real estate wholesaling and, haven't closed your first deal yet. We're kind of going to break down the secret. Uh, People always overcomplicate things, so we're gonna keep things really really simple,
Right.
um, so you can take action. But before we get into that, of course, subscribe, follow us, like this video. Always helps with the algorithm. But we want to get as many people on here so we can help as many people. And feel free to reach out to us on IG. You got our handles down here. Got Tim's over there. Um, yeah, this is going to be a really great episode. We're going to talk about the secret to closing your first deal or getting your first deal. This
I love it.
what the secret is. Um,
The
and
secret
there's
sauce.
the secret sauce that some people starting to talk about, but I think what you typically see now is people mentioning well, you got to do this. It's like a steps, right? Which
Hmm.
for the most part that is the case. But we can simplify the process because everybody breaks down like, okay, get a list, um skip trace it, do this, then to actually do it by themselves, which you do want
Right.
to understand the process. But I believe working with other people helps kind of teach you the process and gets you to learn things a lot quicker. So we're going to be breaking down what that secret sauce is, and you guys may probably get the hint by the time we start breaking things down. But we are going to break down some steps as well, because like anything, I think again people overcomplicate things.
Hmm.
But we can also kind of talk about how we got our first deal too, like what that process looked like. Because I think although we were part of a course, I think we overcomplicated it for ourselves a little bit, and like
Right.
overthinking it, and not knowing what we were doing. I
Hmm.
was like freaking out, just anxiety ridden. So, um, Tim, why don't you break us down into like what that looked like? What your first deal, if anything, would you have done anything differently?
Yeah. My first deal, I think, was a huge learning experience for me. You know, I didn't, you joined the course and you learn all this stuff and you're not sure. I mean, you trust the knowledge, or you trust information, and you start doing it and you're starting to see some results and you start to have some confidence. And then when you get your first deal locked up, it's like a mad rush, and then it's like, what do you do next? So
Right.
that was my experience. And the first thing I did was kind of just negotiated with the seller on the price, and and they were good with that. The problem was there was a tenant in there, issues, like mental issues. So that was a
Mm.
big thing.
I think we're losing you there, Tim. Um, but I mean, at the end of the day, you're kind of solving problems, right? Um, so kind of jumping into it, because I think after you joined the U, it was probably a couple months or maybe a month into it where you kind of got this lead and were able to get it under contract.
Yeah. When I first started calling on it, it was, I think, I kind of started calling in October. I locked it up right at December.
Mm.
And then I didn't close until like March because of the tenant. And that
Right.
was, yeah, so that was the main thing. We had to give the tenant time to move out, and I had to figure out and help the seller how to get the tenant out too. So,
Right.
um, a lot of my process is, what do I do next? Because I didn't really know what to do after I locked it up because I hadn't gone through all the course yet. I just
Right.
midway through the course, I was just making phone calls and learning how to talk to sellers at that point.
Right. And I think that's a great way to break things down because I think I've talked about this before in our group is people sometimes you can get caught up in analysis paralysis or use as an excuse of like, oh, I'm not done with the course yet. I'm not, and then you just never complete the course because it's always like, well, I can't take that step because I haven't completed this. Taking incremental steps. So you kind of focus on the first step or the acquisitions end first
Mhm.
on like, okay, how do I talk to sellers? How do I do this and that? And then once you got locked up, you're like, okay, it's getting real. And you're kind of like failing forward, right? Like
Right.
figuring things out as you go. And although it's a little bit stressful, that's where you can kind of use the community and obviously going back to the course to like ask your
Mhm.
questions and just seeing what you do next. So what and also kind of focusing on solving the problem.
Right.
There's always going to be a problem in like any transaction you do. Everyone's has some form of a problem that they want to sell it cash or quick, and so that's kind of I feel like that's undervalued with what wholesalers bring to the real estate ecosystem, right? Is
Mhm.
not every realtor wants to deal with that, right? It doesn't make
Right.
sense maybe on their end, especially to list something like that. So you need somebody that's kind of the middle person. And you have on the buyer's end too. It's like I don't have time to call these people. Like,
Mhm.
so wholesalers are such a key component to the ecosystem. Um, that once you start focusing on, and I think we've had other guests on here that's mentioned it, like once you start focusing on solving the problems first, the money always comes along the way. So you were able to solve or obviously figure out a problem. You had to go back to the course. Talk to us about like, okay, you had it locked up. Talk about this
Mhm.
title process or the dispo side.
Yeah, so the dispo side, I followed basically the rule, I posted it on Facebook and did that. But I also had some excess funds, so I actually purchased a buyer's list
Mm,
from real estate wealth
mm,
network.com. If you guys can go there, you can buy a cash buyer's list from there. And honestly, that's where I found my cash buyer for that particular deal. And I've found almost all of my cash buyers from that list as well. So
got it.
just a gem there for you guys to
Definitely.
kind of, if you can, I pay it for the full year on that. And then I just start calling people in the area that have bought in that zip code. And so I kind of look and see where we're at. I had it overpriced too, and this is where you can learn how to better comp
Mm,
because
mm-hmm.
you can do your range of comps as is comps, with PropStream or whatever um, tool you're using, but, I had it overpriced and my buyer wanted it under a certain amount, so let's say 100 under 200,000, but I got it locked up low enough that I could, um, get it under 200,000 and still make a spread on it.
Right.
So which was good because I had comped it right, from, getting it under contract, but I didn't excuse me, I didn't um, advertise it I adver right. I didn't
Mm,
advertise it right, so I, had it too high. So that's when
right.
you can go back to your seller or buyers, and I usually say, "What's a number that works for you?" Because sometimes
Mm-hmm.
the buyers will just say, "No, we'll pass on this." And then
Right.
I
Right.
always ask the question my immediate response is, "Are we too far on price, or is there something else on there?" So, sometimes they respond, sometimes they don't, but they're not gonna respond if you don't ask, right?
Right. You always wanna get as much feedback, and that's one thing I've learned. It's like, "Hey, I don't care if I'm off. Just tell me what's a consensus number that, the buyers are coming at?" You always just wanna get feedback. And as you gain
Mhm,
more experience, you'll kind of, be able to comp better and price it better.
mhm,
But you always wanna that's how you know it's like a deal as well, is like, "Hey, am I getting feedback?" Even if people are saying no, but you're getting like, okay, we'd have to be here, and on average that's what the buyers are coming at. That tells you, okay, I'm in a good position. Because one thing I've learned too is you never just want to take the first buyer's feedback and then say,
Mhm.
okay, yes. You want to create a process there, and that takes time too, as you build more experience in like building a system. I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, we're going to give it a week after we take our pictures and list it on Facebook or whatever dispo strategy you use, and then I'm going to collect all the feedback. And you set that time in the description. Okay, we're taking offers until this date, and you want to
Mhm.
stick to that, because if you don't, then like buyers will know like, okay, I can just come in here and say whatever. So once you kind of set that, the deadline basically of like, hey, we have to be, you have to come back with your offers by this price or by this time frame. That's setting you up, because then you're getting as much feedback within that time frame. So if one buyer comes back, I mean, it is kind of exciting, especially if they come, close, above where you may get an assignment fee. So it
Mhm.
can be really exciting. But again, you can't just focus on the money. It's all, you have to focus on the process. So you're like,
Mhm.
okay, even if somebody comes back, be like, great, thank you so much for your submission. We have until this date. We're going to collect all that, and then we'll get back to you. That always helps a lot. But
Yeah.
when it's a really hot deal and you get a ton of feedback, that's always a good time, but it can be really, really overwhelming. So having a process is really important when dispoing it out. And then another kind of gem too is when you're dispoing, and I think this is something we've learned from Chris, is always put or best, like I think he does it where he does the full, the dispo price or best
Mhm.
offer, and then he does a buy it now price.
Yeah. I
That's
did
like,
that
hey,
too.
as
Yeah.
is, no inspection. If it, like, sometimes the pictures are enough. They don't have to
Mhm.
like send someone in to do that. Um, so, fast forward for you, you're able to find your buyer at this the real estate cash buyer feed, or I think it's
Mhm.
what it's called, and you were able to close it out in March. It took several months, but you were able to close it out.
Yeah, the other thing I wanted to talk about too was that after I did find the buyer, well, let's rewind. Before the buyer, I had gotten it into escrow,
Mm,
um, first. So now, I'm at a point in my relationships with escrow and my buyers that I have everything assigned and then I send it to escrow. Before it was I got it locked up, started escrow, not knowing I was gonna have a buyer or not, and then, got the buyer, assigned the contract or had an assignment fee signed, and then sent it off to escrow too,
right.
so that's another thing, but, yeah, after that, it was just we had a last minute inspection after the tenant had moved out, and once, that happened, he did a walkthrough, and he's like, "Let's close tomorrow." So it was like bam, bam, right after the tenant had left,
Hmm.
so but, I did find my other buyer through that walkthrough because he brought his his contractor that was working on all the properties that he was renovating,
Mm,
and then after the inspection, the investor left, and me and the contractor started talking, and I just start talking about the neighborhood and what I'm doing, and he just said, "Hey, do you mind adding me to your buyers list so you can send me some properties as well?" And I said, "Yeah." And that's how I locked up my second deal was through that, investor or that, contractor.
yeah, exactly. It's just talking about it. Um,
Mhm.
Now we are like kind of breaking down like our first deal, but I promise you we'll kind of go deep into what, you know, the secret and like what you guys can do. Because I think it's important for you guys to kind of see like, hey, we didn't have it all figured out.
Yeah.
We didn't know what we were doing. We're still part of a course, so we had the advantage of being able to ask the questions, but we know what we're doing as we are talking about it. I mean, the same for me too. Actually, my first deal I got under contract and closed, I got the lead my first day cold calling ever.
Mm. Wow.
And it was funny because we were kind of playing phone tag. I had gotten call tools, I think, and she had picked up, but I think she had bad connection. So she was trying to call back, and I didn't have my phone redirect set up correctly. So she was just leaving like voicemails thinking like she was talking to me or something. So I finally got her on, and she was a tired landlord, lived or absentee tired landlord. So she lived in a whole other state in the East Coast. I think she lived in South Carolina. But this was a property in California, and there was a tenant in there, and the tenant has lived there forever. And but they were in the process of buying their own home and moving out. So I also had to deal with the tenant situation, but it was a little bit more, they were kind of, had their stuff together and were again ready to buy a home. But I had also locked it going with the negotiations. I went to see the property first because I didn't have the confidence to just, close beforehand, and I didn't have all that communication. Obviously now I kind of explained to the seller, hey, we usually get it under contract first and then we go out to see the property. But I went out to see the property, and I was up against another person. I don't know if they were another wholesaler or actual buyer. But I went there, nice dress shirt, and like introduced myself and to the tenant, and just really just try to put a good impression, because the tenant, I found out, called the seller afterwards saying like, oh yeah, this is I think I went by a fake name. I think Jennifer or something. Yeah, Jennifer, she seems really nice. Yada yada yada. And I think the other people had offered her less. I was the only one that offered her more. I think I had offered like three, because this is California, like
Right.
330 or something like that, and or 340. No. I offered her 350, I think. And I really should have been, ideally, to get a good spread, I probably should have been like at 325, and I probably would have been fine. But again, I didn't have the confidence in breaking that down. So she accepted the 350. And I also did get it, attempted to submit it to the title company first, but fortunately the title company was like, wait, you don't have a buyer yet, like don't send it over. Like the escrow person told me. And I was like, oh really? I was a little confused. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, I'm supposed to do it,
Right.
So I was like, okay. So I did the same way, like listed it on Facebook. I think also Craigslist as well.
Yeah.
And so I really learned quickly, like determining who's a wholesaler, who's not, who's scamming me. People just
Right.
saying like, send me the address, send me the address. And I'd just be like, no, could you, send me a proof of funds, which is also really important, guys, when you're dispoing, or ask for a recent HUD.
100%.
And I came across this one, like some people were interested, but it wasn't until this one like bigger, they were sort of like a hedge fund, but they were like a real estate company that buys properties, flips them, and then puts them on their little, they have like a listings thing. So I built a great relationship with the acquisitions person there. She was really, really sweet. And she was like, I don't, based off the pictures, we don't need to go to the property. But we'll have to be, because I think I had my dispo price was like at 360 or 360, I think. And she was like, we'll have to be at 340. And so that was $10,000 less than what I had to lock that up at. So I was super nervous about renegotiating, because the seller had a daughter who was like really involved and was like, why are you, who are you? And, I didn't know how to react to that. And she's like, what's your company's name? And I didn't have an objection sheet. So I remember going on the call and like asking Chris, I'm like, how do I handle this? And he was just like, just be you, just be confident how this is my company. And you can even say I still work. And so that's kind of how I went. And all it was, guys, I had to explain my process. And to say like I knew what I was doing. So I explained like, we buy properties. The first process is we've already gone out to seen the property, but we'll want to do an inspection. And so this is what we did, or this is what we do. We'll get it under contract. We'll get it into escrow, start that process, and then close within, we'll work with the tenant. And that was it. She was like, okay. like, it was just like we overthink things so much when we're going
Mhm.
through this process. So um I was able to get the price reduction, so that would give me like an $8,000 assignment fee, or 5,000, because I really did the most. I did the reduction a lot more than I should have. I was like, yeah,
Mhm.
I'll pay whatever remaining taxes you have,
Right.
just to get her to say yes. And would I do that now? No, I would have done things a little bit differently. But I was like, hey, this is my first deal. I was determined.
Yeah.
So I went back to the buyer, and we were able to close. The only thing was like with the tenant situation, I was really nervous because I was like, what if they don't get qualified, or what if they don't get accepted to buy this house? But they
Mhm.
were able to work it out. I went and did the final inspection, just to confirm it was vacant. And the rest is history. So
Yeah.
that
That's
closed
dope.
in November. So this was a lead that came in end of September. I got locked up in October, and then it closed the week of Thanksgiving. So, um, guys, like, it's really what the process we just explained to you is really complicated,
Yeah.
especially when you're starting out, because
Mhm.
if you notice something, we did it by ourselves.
Mhm.
um but we learned a lot out of it. We kind of learned a lot about the process, but with that, the secret sauce that you guys really want to know, that we would have done things differently, is I would have partnered with somebody out in our market who was
Yeah.
maybe closing more deals, or partner up with somebody who maybe is on the dispo side, because we had all the data. So the first kind of tip in terms of the secret sauce is just finding where you can add value to someone. So
Mhm.
are you really good at talking to buyers? Do you have a passion for that? I mean, not even passion, but is there an interest in, like, I'd rather just go straight to the source and talk to buyers, and then reverse engineer it, find somebody who has some leads, and just let them know, hey, I have buyers in this area? Or are you more concentrate on the acquisitions end? So you want to get the data, market out to sellers, or again, if you're on a budget, driving for dollars. Just find a value add that, like, you can contribute to somebody. That's the biggest thing, because not everybody can do the same thing. So whether it's one or the other, let's just say your acquisitions end, you have the data, or you're driving for dollars and you find a really distressed house or whatever. Find somebody who is either in your market, or if it's a virtual market, and see what they need. Like, hey, do you have buyers? What areas are your buyers buying? And I'll bring you leads. That's the quickest way for you to close your first deal, is to
Yeah.
just partner with somebody who's experienced, an experienced wholesaler. Now, if they're not in a community like, the U or anything like that, you do have to vet them out. So make sure, you ask questions about their process, um, you know, just, and then, like, seeing, maybe asking other people about them,
Mhm.
to make
What
sure
deals
there's
they've done.
references. Yeah, what deals they've done. Um, and also kind of understanding, like, what the JV process would be, because this is what's called joint venture,
Right.
JVing, where you're partnering up with somebody for the deal. And then once you kind of feel confident, you then find the leads, and then as you find the leads, you then go back to them like, hey, I have this lead, they're at this price, where do I need to be?
Mhm.
And if it's a good deal, they'll be like, yeah, try to get it at this price. And there's so much confidence when you're kind of working with someone too, right? Then you trying to figure it out on your own, and trying to, like, figure out the comps, because that's going to come. That takes time to really, like, understand it. But if somebody can be like, hey, Tim, if you can get at 350, I got
Mhm.
somebody for it. Like, imagine the
Yeah.
confidence in how you deliver that offer.
Absolutely.
It's going to be different. So then once you go back to the seller, get it under contract, because I do recommend getting under contract yourself. But if you're too scared because you don't have an LLC, I understand, maybe you may want to get it under contract with, on your partner's end. um, but you can get it under contract under your name,
Mhm.
especially for your first deal.
Yeah.
But we do recommend getting an LLC, but you can get it under your name, just so you have contractual rights to the property, because that kind of gives you leverage as well, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
Um, so then once you get under contract, you then connect with this person, you send them a JV agreement, and there's a ton of JV agreements, and they should probably have one if they're experienced. they should send it over, you sign it, and then, they have a buyer, they assign it, and then they turn it into escrow.
Right.
Now it's a little bit simpler. It's a little more complicated depending on the situation. There could be tenant situation, of course,
Mm-hmm.
but in the really simplistic terms, that's what you can do to close your first deal.
Yeah.
And some of it doesn't even have to be out of your own money. You can do a driving
Mm-hmm.
for dollars, like a deal machine, which is an application for specifically for driving for dollars, where you can do it as you're driving, or you can do a virtual driving for dollars, where it's just
Right.
through Google Maps. So,
Mm-hmm.
guys, it's not that over complicated, especially for your first deal. Like, imagine getting a $5,000 check, a $2,000, 10 grand.
Mm-hmm.
Like that goes a long way. And if you imagine you add those up with more, like, why not start there? That's one thing I would have done to get my first deal.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm grateful for my first deal, of course, but
Yeah, me
I could have
too.
closed a lot more had I done that.
Yeah. And I think I just want to touch on this part, and then we'll kind of go into budgets and stuff too. But I just want to touch on the feeling of emotions that happen on your first deal, because a lot of people don't talk about that a little bit.
Mm.
And it's like when you first get your deal, you're super excited. It's almost like you're going to Vegas, like driving to Vegas from California. You get super excited on your way trip, and then, it's longer than you think. So it calms down, and, when we're going to get there type of thing. It's the
Right.
same way with your deal, because you don't know what's gonna really happen next in between you locking it up and closing day, right?
Right.
So, if you're gonna find a buyer, and then you have to talk to the buyer, and if the buyer wants it less, if you have to go back to talk to the seller to get it less, right? So there's
Yeah.
a range of emotions that happen during this time, and just understand it's part of the process, right? And I was panicked when I got it locked up, and I didn't know what to do next. So,
Right.
and then I had to ask the questions, and then maybe I didn't get and don't take if you're partnering up with somebody, don't take their lack of response not in the couple seconds that you're wishing they would respond to them not working with you, right? They have other deals that they're working on too, and you just
Right.
have to realize that time as well too. So just don't get overly panicked. And I think that's what happens when they first JV with somebody, they don't know the process. So if the person that they're JVing with you kinda walks you through that process and what's to expect, that will
Right.
calm your nerves down a lot, so
Yeah, and that's how you know you're dealing with a professional as well as somebody that they're kind of selling you on the process too. It's like,
Mhm.
okay, so what you do is, because this is why you should talk to them first, or have a conversation on, like, okay, come back with me with the price. I'll let you know what price point to be at, get it under contract. I'll send you a JV agreement. From there, I'll, communicate with the buyer. Like, it's just the same thing we do with the sellers.
Mhm.
Um, and I think you touched upon something huge as well with the emotions. Is there's baby wins in every step of the transaction,
Right.
right? So when you talk to a seller and they say they're interested, that's a baby win. When they accept their offer, when you get a verbal offer, that's a baby win. When you get it locked up, that's a baby win. When you find a buyer that says they're interested, that's a baby win. When they give you an offer that works, you know what I mean? Like, you want to, it
Mhm.
is kind of, there is a lot going on, but enjoy those little wins within that,
Yeah.
because those are all like something to be excited about. But there's nothing like closing day when it's like you get from escrow and it's like you're good. um for me is also like, why I mentioned it's a baby win is because when the buyer signs the assignment and puts the EMD, there's like a kind of a sigh of like, well, if anything goes wrong, at least I get their EMD,
Right.
right?
Right.
So it's kind of like, all right, I got it this far, that the next step is whatever it is. So enjoy those little wins, because every transaction isn't created equal. You're gonna go through transactions that just don't work out and you have to cancel. or you know, you
Mhm.
find out that maybe it's the tenant situation is worse. So enjoy those little wins in the process. But this is why, you know, we recommend partnering up with somebody, is because you get to share that with someone. And of course, you know, splitting it, but wouldn't you want to do that? Wouldn't that save you time? Like, a lot of us work jobs, right? Why not just reach out to somebody who's closing deals, or who is established in their market, um, and say, "Hey, what do you need? What can I do for you?" And I'll go find it. Tell me what zip codes, what around what
Right.
price point are the zip codes, you know, and you know, don't overcomplicate it. Like, even if your budget, and I know that's something we talked about, um, whether you have no budget, whether your budget's 100,
Mhm.
$300, there's services that you can use. So I think I've included some links down below. We may add some more, but one of them is, you know, if your budget is like $100, you can get a marketing plex that's
Mhm.
25 bucks a month. Well, plus the numbers and plus the text messages, like maybe can go up to 50, 75, maybe $100 a month. You can just use that tool alone to manage your data, send text messages, make calls, because they have a single dialer. So definitely check that out if that's something you're interested in. You know, I always say eventually, like, you should be able to manage your data. So a tool like REI Sift or Batch
Mhm.
Leads is a great tool as
Yep.
well. And then if you're really balling on the budget, you can only pick one service. I do recommend the Marketing Plex, but if you know, Driving for Dollars, a deal machine, I think is like 50, 60 bucks a month. But that's something you can use while you're driving, if you're always out and about, or virtual um Driving for Dollars. So you can just
Yep.
sit from your laptop and like find properties and add them to a list, export it, and plug that into your marketing. So there's no reason why you can't get a deal now in 2023, even with the market, whatever's happening right now. Like, just connect with somebody who's established, who's closing deals, because you can deal with zero. Because we've seen people do it. Like,
Mhm.
maybe their budget was 50 bucks or 100 bucks or nothing. They're like, all my money's going into this group. I just need to figure something out. And they, like,
Right.
you figure it out. So, you know, don't be scared to take that step. And there's something comforting about also knowing that you're partnering with somebody as well. Like, you're not alone in this process. And you can
Mhm.
ask this person questions too. And once you understand the process, you can take that and apply it to, you know, on your own end. So,
Right.
you know, definitely something to think about, because that's honestly the best way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think if you have no budget, the best way is gonna be partnering up, because then you if you don't have the budget to get a dialer or even the text messaging with Marketingplex or anything like that, the least you could do is get a Podio. That's totally free. It's a CRM system. You can put all your leads in there.
Mhm.
And then what you can do is you partner up with somebody that has leads. You call on their dialer and you start making calls, and then you guys just make an arrangement on the split of what that's gonna look like, and then you just JV that deal so you can at least get on the phones with people and start talking to sellers and, you know, learning that process and getting offers out, and then keeping track of, you know, these leads and who you need to follow up on Podio. So that's kind of that would be the blueprint if you had no budget, 0 budget, you know, you joined a group and you really don't have any money to kinda get these extra tools that can help you.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's why I kind of want to lay out different options, because whether your budget's 300 a month, 100, or no budget, there's tools that you can use. I mean, Driving for Dollars, like, you don't even need a deal machine.
Mhm.
Like, you can
Yep.
just, I think Google Maps has a feature where you can pin specific addresses. It's not as pretty as like a deal machine, but that's free, that you can also use to save properties that you come across. Because if you're driving around, that's, I mean, that is gas. So nothing is technically free ever. But
Right.
in terms of like managing subscriptions, like where it's, you know, you're not spending any extra money, this is the best way to do it.
Yeah. 100%. 100%
So
on that.
we're oh, go ahead.
No, no, go ahead.
Yeah, we're at the end of the segment, but I hope you guys got a lot of value out of this. Something that we've learned. We kind of broke down our first deals and how, you know, crazy it was doing it on our own. We would have, some things we would have done differently is definitely partner up with somebody much sooner and utilizing the network that we did have to work together. We would have saved so much time and stress from doing it. But you know, you live and you learn. We learn from our experiences. But if you guys really are balling on the budget, like there's so many resources you can you utilize, especially if you're in a group or you know, through Instagram, Twitter, whatever the case may be. Reach out to people. That's the biggest thing, is grow your network, and then the rest kind of put into place. So if you have any questions for us, feel free to, you know, post a comment, reach out to us on IG. You have our handles right here. We also have more information about us in the show notes. But next week should be another amazing episode. Really appreciate you guys who tuned in. We're here for you guys, but you guys enjoy the rest of your day. Have a great weekend, and we'll connect with you guys next week.
All right, guys. See you.
Later.